Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of Cabinet at Staffordshire County Council today, Wednesday the 24th of January. First item is apologies. Mr Bradbury, do we have any apologies?
Good morning, Leader. I have just the one apology from Councillor Jessel.
Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest in accordance with Standing Order 16. Do you have any declarations of interest? For the record, nobody is indicating. Agenda item 3, this is a single item Cabinet meeting this morning and is merely to make recommendations to full Council from Cabinet regarding the medium-term financial strategy 24 to 29. With that, I shall hand over to Councillor Ian Parry, the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, to introduce and explain the recommendations. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everyone. So I present this report on behalf of the Leader of the Council and myself. And may I start by thanking the Director of Finance and his team on the preparation of the medium-term financial strategy and the budget for 2024-25. I'm really grateful for the excellent work that the team does on this, and we are well supported in our financial expertise within this council. So this morning we're updating the medium-term financial strategy for 2024 to 2029. The aim is to balance the ambitions of this council as set out in the strategic plan with a clear commitment contained to deliver a value for money basis for residents and businesses and to live within our means. We need to strike a balance. There's always a balance in life, isn't there, between ensuring that we stick to the pledge and ensure that we continue to invest in those things which support the residents of Staffordshire. Despite the well-documented financial challenges facing the local government sector overall, I think it's thanks to the long-term planning, the creative and imaginative change that this council has gone through, and also the brave level of, the courageous level of change that this council has gone through. And the careful management of our resources means that this council remains financially stable. It's that stability which allows us also to meet our statutory responsibilities and also to look to the future by investing in our economy, our infrastructure and communities. The underlying principles of the financial planning in the medium-term financial strategy are that since February, inflation has not reduced as quickly as it was hoped and remains higher than the 2% target. In addition, interest rates have risen higher than anticipated in February and are likely to stay at that level for longer than expected. But underpinning the planning framework is the Council's aim of setting a good and balanced budget. The content of these tests set by and have to be agreed by the Director of Finance and Section 151 officer are set out in the report and conclude that we do indeed meet the requirements of a good and balanced budget. The integrated performance reports, which Cabinet receive each quarter, show a picture of relative financial stability during 2023-24, except for areas in, as we know, children's services and SEND transport. In addition, the high needs block, which is funded from the dedicated schools grant, is also overspending due to increased demand. These are the key areas of financial overspend type pressure that we are addressing at the moment. The Council has a proven track record, however, of delivering cost reductions, with £127 million worth of savings having been identified and delivered in the past 7 years, up to the year 2022-23. Inflation has risen to as high as 10.4% and has since reduced to 3.9%, but the Bank of England still expects us to remain above the 2% target until around the end of 2025. Conversely, the higher interest rates happily mean larger returns on our investments, which also is a financial benefit to the MTFS. The local government settlement, which came out on the 18th of September, provided no new grants, but some funding streams attracted an inflation rate of 6.7 uplift based on September CPI figure. This, along with the government's assumption on the tax base, means that Staffordshire's core spending power increased by 6.9%, whereas benchmarked against the national of 6.5%. Much of that, of course, is due to the fact that we are able to increase our council tax as well. There was some additional funding, however, in the social care support grant beyond previous forecasts and the new homes bonus, which continues. However, the services grant has been reduced nationally in order to fund increases in other elements of the settlement. It's always a swings and roundabout event when it comes to the local government settlement. Taking everything into account, however, the net position in the council's finances is a small overall increase of 3.6 million compared to the estimates that were made before the settlement. We have some projected pressures and some cost reduction options that we need to address. The total amount of extra funding allocated for inflation next year is 22.3 million, which is an addition to the 26 million already added last year. Quite a significant amount that we're having to fund for inflation. So sorry. Adult social care pressures continue to dominate the budget process, in particular around the care market and the national living wage, which has obviously increased pipeline costs for adult social care in the council. These pressures, however, have been largely offset by additional precept facility and the social care grant. Transformation of the children's system is a key priority and a key programme within the council. It's set against a backdrop of much higher demand for children's services, with increasing numbers of children in our care. Therefore, an additional 9.5 million will be added to the children's services budget for 2024-25 to fund the increase in cost of placements and to fund part of the transitional programme. The existing savings still remain to be delivered, and the additional budget reprofiles these savings over the period of the MTFS, so we have not lost sight of the expectation of savings through the transformation of the children's system. Increasing numbers of health and care plans are placing further pressures on SEND services, including home-to-school transport. Additional funding of 647,000, therefore, has been added to the service budget to fund inflationary pressures on fuel, and a further £2.8 million has been added to address the overriding overspend arising from the 2023-24 period. The service has a plan to address both volume and demand increases in this area in order to deliver savings, which we've assumed in the medium-term financial strategy of 1.5 million in 2024, rising to 9.5 million by the end of the MTFS. We are facing, inevitably, as every organisation does, a series of risks. There are a range of risks which we need to carefully monitor and manage, including inflationary pressures and increased demand on particular service areas. Having a one-year settlement announced does not aid long-term financial planning and does not allow the County Council to do such things as to try to help to stabilise the care market. There have been a number of reviews of funding discussed over the last few years, and either relating specifically to council tax or business rates, or a more general fair funding review. But currently, nothing concrete has come forward, and these proposals remain unknown and uninitiated. The biggest service risks are in social care, both adults and children's. This includes our ability to continue to control demand as the population continues to age, and the success of ongoing actions to control prices. The announcement of a delay to the introduction of the social care reforms means that those delays to those costs being incurred are still on the table and are as yet unknown exactly what measures we will have to take if these changes are implemented, and therefore how much the County Council will need to pay. It's a serious unknown or known unknown at the moment in terms of what changes will be made to social care, and it hasn't been removed. It's not been taken off the table. Risks are inherent in the whole system around children and families, including the risks around capacity in the courts to facilitate children leaving care, and the risks of the number of children needing our care continue to rise in terms of demand and complexity. There is also a financial risk involved in the County Council's response to the Ofsted report on children's services and the financial costs this may incur in terms of what changes need to be made. So this will mean potential costs of delivering the agreed implementation plan and also an increased risk around non-delivery of agreed savings while that plan is implemented. The risk of increased numbers of children requiring EHCP's education and healthcare plans is significant, and these plans are driving costs in SEND transport in particular. Increased numbers of EHCPs also increase the overspend on the high needs block, further decreasing the dedicated schools grant deficit, further increasing the deficit, shall I say. A continuation of the statutory override beyond 2025-26 is probably the most acceptable scenario. But it may well arise that the complex and difficult nature of the answers to this situation are not simply to put off the problem to the medium term when the size of the deficit is expected to be much larger. I think it's reasonable and safe and practical for us to consider how this fully funded solution might impact on the council and how we might need to take account of that in the future and to provide for that eventuality if necessary. Council tax and business rates. The current assumption is the financial plans contained in the report show that we will recommend to Council that council tax is increased by 2.99% for 2024-25, and the additional adult social care precept is increased by 2% in line with the cap limits. Therefore, it's assumed that the general precept will increase by 1.99 and the adult social care precept will increase by 1% in the years thereafter in the medium-term financial plan. This will mean that, given that increase, the Band D cost will be £1,544.64, which is an increase of £73.41 per annum for the average council taxpayer. Businesses across the globe have obviously been hit by rising costs and increased interest rates, and we therefore predict only a small increase in income from business rates for the 2024-25 budget. And our reserves and balances, earmark reserves have been reviewed and are deemed to be fit for purpose. At the end of 22-23, general balances were 52.3 million, subject to any unforeseen circumstances. That forecast will remain at that level by March 2024. Alongside this review, it's important that we have some contingency for the unforeseen occurrences that have appeared in the past. And at the moment, we're keeping that at £15 million contingency for 2024-25, but dropping it down to £10 million contingency from 2025-26 onwards in the MTFS. There is this continuing risk, as I've already mentioned, in respect to the dedicated schools grant deficit, which cannot be ignored. The deficit is forecast to increase significantly and will impact on the overall reserves assessment unless this issue is grasped by central government. I'm really grateful for the work of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee and for the working group, the Budget Working Group, for their efforts and hard work in scrutinising the medium-term financial strategy. For me, as a Cabinet member, it's gratifying and reassuring that it has undertaken robust scrutiny. I am very grateful to the committee for that work. They made several recommendations which have been considered by Cabinet and have been incorporated. These can be seen in the report at Appendix 12. In conclusion there, Chair, Leader, after allowing for the unknown pressures and savings and a targeted, controlled use of reserves to smooth out some parts of the MTFS, It is now balanced over the 5-year period. This is a significant achievement, particularly in the current climate, and given that we are also underpinning this with a large capital programme to invest in schools, roads and economic regeneration scheme, and some other investments which are also planned and will be announced throughout the year. There are a number of risks to this strong financial position, such as the next spending review and any future government reviews of funding schemes. Also, continued use of reserves to balance the budget or to smooth the budget is not sustainable in the longer term, and therefore work must be done immediately on ways to reduce the cost of the transformation needed to be identified so that savings can be generated from year 5 of the MTFS period onward. We think, and I personally think, that the digital strategy has a role to play in this in the future in terms of transformation. So, Lynn, I move on to recommendations. They are long and detailed, and I think you've heard enough from me so far. So I'm going to recommend, therefore, that in respect to the medium-term financial strategy 2024-29 and the budget for 2024-25, Cabinet agrees all of the recommendations set out in the attached report.
Thank you. Cabinet colleagues, you'll note that the first recommendation is to consider the updates to the financial plans as set out in this report. Should any Cabinet colleague not be aware of the financial plans set out in this report, I would be immensely surprised. And actually, the purpose of this meeting today is predominantly to recommend to full council, which is the tax-setting body for the authority, the recommendations set out from D1 to 8. Does anybody have any questions notwithstanding? Councillor Parry, would you like to read the recommendations in their entirety, or are you just going to leave it with the recommendations as set out? I'll read the recommendations then in that case, because I think, as you said earlier, perhaps people have had enough from you.
I think that was kind.
Connection loss, is it? Okay, you got the recommendations. They are that we consider the updates to the financial plans as set out in the report. Second, note the comments of the Director of Finance on the adequacy of reserves and robustness of the budget, and that the County Council be asked to take note of these comments when considering the budget and council tax. C, consider the recommendations of Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee and approve the Cabinet's responses to those recommendations. D, recommend that to the County Council on the 8th of February 2024 that they consider and approve the following. First, a net revenue budget of £666,671,000 for the period 24-25. Second, planning forecasts for 25-26 to 28-29 as set out in Appendix 11. Third, a contingency provision of £15 million for 24-25. Fourth, a net contribution to reserves of £4,552,000 for 24-25. Fifth, a budget requirement of £671,223,000 for 24-25. Sixth, a council tax requirement of £459,123,000 for 24-25. Seventh, a council tax band D of £1,544.64 for 24-25, which is an increase of 4.99% when compared with 23-24. And seventh, this results in the council tax for each category of dwelling set out in a table in the papers. Ninth, there were further recommendations, that the Director of Finance be authorised to sign precept notices on the billing authorities respectively liable for the total precept payable, and that each notice states the total precept payable and the council tax in relation to each category of dwelling as calculated in accordance with the statutory requirements. And 10, the financial health indicators set out in Appendix 10. Those are the recommendations that have been moved. All those in favour?
Agreed.
That is agreed. Before I sign off, though, can I add to Councillor Parry's note of thanks, my thanks to the finance team and to all Cabinet colleagues for the hard work that you've done throughout this year to get us to this position. It is a difficult thing to do, to try and run a large upper-tier local authority and keep it within budget. And I know you and your teams work tremendously hard to do that. It is a testament to the efforts that have been made over the past year and few years that we're able to present a budget of this nature. And when we look around the country and we see other local authorities struggling, we don't rest on our laurels, but we know that it's down to hard work that we've already undertaken and more hard work for the future. So let's make sure that we're fit to fight for the future, and let's carry on and continue to deliver great services for the people of Staffordshire. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the meeting.